The Eagles enter the bye week 6-2 as they took care of business at home, beating the New York Giants 38-20 in what kind of was you know, a game that got the emotion taken out of it pretty early in this one. Before I say anything about the game itself, I need to address the Cam Skattebo injury, which was an awful ankle injury that he suffered. It was tough. That happened at the very beginning, very end of the first quarter. Um, and it was tough to see. I hope he recovers well. I know he's a tough guy, and I have all the faith in the world that he recovers. But that's just an injury that sucks to see, especially in the moment. When I was watching it live, I put my hands up. I was like, this sucks. Like, you never want to see an injury like that to any player, let alone a rookie who was infusing life into this Giants team, who was the heart and soul. I think after that moment, you really saw, you know, the sadness on Dart's face, the sadness around the team. They tried to pick it up for him, but you could tell it took the life out of them. Not to mention, this game in general was like a poorly called game for the New York Giants in specific. This was kind of the first game I've seen in a really long time where like the calls on the field were terrible and blessed the Eagles on multiple situations. And I really didn't like that. So I'm going to address those, but I want to start off with, the good in this game. And the good in this game for the Philadelphia Eagles was that they really found the rhythm again. It started with a Saquon Barkley in the second play of the game ripping off a huge 65-yard touchdown run. That's what we're talking about. That's what we've been missing all year, was that explosive run play. That's the thing that's been lacking. It was, this rushing offense, can they figure it out? They finally went after it. This is with the Eagles missing A.J. Brown. So this was going to be like, how is this Eagles offense going to attack this defense? And they went right after it and ran right down their throat, and Saquon was able to take advantage right away. And he finished with a whopping 150 yards in this game. Exactly, 14 carries, 150 yards, averaged 10 yards a carry. And Tank Bigsby, who we traded for earlier in the year, spent 2 late-round picks to get him. We were using him as a kick returner, which wasn't his, position of strength. And he got in as a runner today, and he had 9 carries, 104 yards. He was doing a really good job, including breaking up Hurst down on a 2nd and 31 after a really bad sack in the second half that the Eagles took. He bailed out the Eagles a couple times here. So overall, the running game was unstoppable. And that's, this was probably the most 2024 that the 2025 Eagles have looked. And I would say it looked a lot cleaner in the sense of we had more variety in the play calling, right? A lot of under center plays, a lot of under center play action. Like, these are the things that the Eagles haven't really done much, even going back to last year. Now we're seeing a lot of that this year and a lot of development coming from that. So I want to give Kevin Patullo a shout out for the guys executing the plays. I mean, Jalen Hurts went 15-20, 179 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And he had a close one there at the very end where Jahan Dotson ended up mossing their practice squad corner at that point, because the Giants were dealing with injuries on their cornerbacks as well. So you want to give the guys, props for outperforming the players in front of them. That's why you have all these really good players on the roster. That's why you have depth for this reason. You have Jahan Dotson, who could be a number 2 on any other team, doing really good things here in the opportunities that he gets. So you gotta give these guys credit for staying ready in these moments. And overall, the offense did a really good job. Although it was inconsistent at times, the Eagles' defense did enough to hold things together. I mean, Jackson Dart played a decent game. He did get one taken away from him, and that was off of a offensive pass interference from Darius Slayton. That was one of those questionable calls. I've seen receivers, duke it out, and receivers and corners duke it out when they get handsy. So it was Darius Slayton, Quinyon Mitchell. They get handsy. You see Slayton, but he does push off. Like, I will give him that. You see the extension. It's not like, it wasn't like a hand move. He extended his arms to create separation. But I think in that moment, I've seen guys like Devontae Adams do a lot worse and get away with a lot worse in those situations too, with no foul being called. So I thought in that moment that was really interesting. By that time, the Giants were trying to make a push. The Eagles were up by a lot at that point. It wouldn't have, I don't think, the thing is, like, any of these questionable calls that happened in this game, albeit there was a few, I don't think it was enough to turn the tide in this game, right? So that's where I felt like the Eagles were playing like the better team. They were going to win anyway. That's really just kind of how the overall game felt. Like Dart was under pressure quite a lot from our defense. I know there was a stat early on where he had like his first 15 dropbacks. He was pressured on 14 of them. He was just getting pressured all day. He finishes 14, 24, 193. It was a a rookie like game stats wise, but I think he played pretty well given the emotional turmoil he had to go through, things like that. Just the whole team in general. Like you could see the frustration. It was a frustrating day for the New York Giants playing in Philadelphia, and I don't blame them a lot. Like every call didn't go their way. Like it was just a rough experience. It was a tough watch at times because I'm like, man, like if you just let the games play how it's supposed to be played, we're talking about Jalen Hurts fumbling on a tush push where he gets the ball ripped away from him by Kayvon Thibodeau before he touches the ground. That should be a fumble. Like I'm not gonna sit here and say like, oh, it was fine, it was legal. Jalen Hurts was still in that pile, and he did push the ball out. It wasn't the goal line, so he shouldn't have done that. Just like they said on the broadcast, and I thought it was a perfectly fine, turnover. Like that's just how it is. Like I'm not gonna, advocate for a bad call. Like that's just I'll call it how I see it, and I think that should have been a fumble there. Now, it was a fourth down play on the New York Giants side. I think that it wasn't going to, whether they gave it to us or not. Yes, we scored a touchdown on that, continuing that drive from there. But I didn't think that had the Giants gotten that call, it would have made the difference, right? But obviously, that's a momentum killer for a defense. You think you have a bit good play, you make a stop on a tush push by creating a turnover, and you don't get it. That's frustrating. So I don't blame the Giants for it just wasn't their day. But the Eagles defense held them to 5 of 12 from third down and was much better defensive efficiency. I thought the defense played really well given the circumstances. And they forced the Giants into 7 penalties. The Eagles had 5. Overall, it's just another ugly game that I think was really bad for like narratives about the Eagles. But I do think the Eagles did what they were supposed to do in this game, and they won with the style they wanted. They've been wanting to have all year. 276 total rushing yards for the team is exactly how this team was trying to set themselves up identity-wise. And now I think that when we look at this team moving forward, it's not about, creating this identity of, oh, we need to run the ball like crazy. It's the balance that we're looking for. Jalen was efficient. I mean, when you have 4 touchdowns, you're putting yourselves in position to score. And I think that it wasn't just the offense, the special teams. Will Shipley had a couple big returns in this game too. That set the Eagles up in good spots too. So I think the Eagles executed. They were efficient. They weren't efficient on third down. Again, they were 2 of 8. So, still those issues still exist. But I think that overall, this was probably the most complete game that the Eagles have played all year. Obviously, this is the first game that they've won that it wasn't a 1-score game. So this is the movement, the growth, the progress that we were hoping to see. So overall in this game, I didn't, I don't want to I don't know how to describe it. This game going into the bye week is more of this could have been a looking forward opportunity. The Eagles wanted to make sure they took care of business and, had to survive a few more, injuries. Saquon Barkley did get hurt in this game. He did look like he tweaked. He broke off another big run in the second half, and it looked like he tweaked. It looked like at the time he tweaked his hamstring, but I guess they were calling it a groin injury. Fortunately, the Eagles have the bye week, so perfect timing to see, can he get healthy? But that's something now we have to pay attention to in the coming weeks with the groin, hamstrings. You never know how sensitive those can be. So the same thing with A.J. Brown. He gets the week off. He got this week off of practice as well. So he's basically getting 2 full weeks off of practice. Will that help him be ready for when they play the Packers when they return from the bye? So this is, the Eagles just need to get right. They need to take some time. Can they get healthy during this bye week? Who is going to be back? Can Cam Jurgens get back? Like, will this team be at full strength by the time we face the Packers in week 11? So my overall takeaway from this game was the Eagles took care of business against an inferior team, and they looked like they were always going to do it. They were the better coached team. They did a lot of good things here. The Giants did get screwed in a lot of spots here. It was not fun to watch that happen, and obviously the injuries took the air out of the whole arena. Like, I know the Eagles fans are passionate. They love it, but they're not going to – everyone hated that injury. Everyone hated that Cam Skattebo injury. and it was really frustrating to see. I hated it. Like, I hope that he gets better soon. I hope that everything is okay, and that surgery goes well for him. But it's just frustrating. Yeah, you never like to see it. So I hated that so much going into it. But overall, the team did what they were supposed to do. The Eagles get to move on in the standings 6-2. And that puts them in second after the Packers won against the Steelers because the Packers have less losses. So, I guess that works out in their favor. So it sets up a matchup with the Packers, who may have 6 wins next time we see them, who may be 5-2-1. So regardless, this is going to be a matchup that we're really excited for. And when we look at where the Eagles are going into this bye week, I'm going to give them a grade on the pod during the week with Ben, and go over who the MVP is. And I think it's pretty obvious at this point, but I think that the Eagles have gone through what seems like a season's worth of drama already in the first 8 weeks, and have really shown growth, and have really shown that they are up to the pressure again. They're up to the task. So this is a win against an inferior team that we should have won. So I'm not going to say we're all the way back. They did what they were supposed to do, and that's important because we haven't done that a lot this year. It felt like the most consistent 4 quarters that we've played all year long. So that's the big takeaway from this game, in my opinion. And when we look at the NFC East scenario, things are setting up where the Eagles might be the first repeat team since 2004. Now, I know it might be too early to say. A collapse is still totally on the table, right? You never know with this team what can happen when the schedule gets tougher down the stretch, but they have beaten really good teams, and that's something we cannot ignore. So, this game was good for the point differential narrative for the Eagles. Oh man, they're -4 for the whole year. This helps a little bit, right? So the offense looks solid. The defense looks better because, you're adding Nakobe Dean back to the fold. They can do a couple different things to make up for some of their cornerback issues that they're having outside of Quinyon Mitchell. I thought that the Eagles did a really good job in this game. So, yeah, the overall NFC East picture, the Eagles are sitting there at 6-2. The Cowboys lost the game to the Broncos pretty badly. So what looked like a game where the Cowboys could gain momentum, beat a team that beat the Eagles. No, the Broncos have beaten up on the NFC East this year so far, and are also 6-2. So that loss to the Broncos is looking a little bit better, kind of. I mean, they still blew a huge lead just like the Giants did, right? But the Cowboys couldn't hold on. So the Eagles have a really nice gap. And obviously the injuries to the Commanders, the Commanders have a date with the Chiefs on Monday. Who knows what that's going to look like for them too. The Eagles could have a comfortable lead coming out of this bye week, and some room for error in this division, which felt like it was going to be a lot closer just a few weeks ago, right? So I think that the Eagles are in a really good spot for the playoffs this year. And that's always kind of the hope, is that this team just gets to the playoffs so then they can do what they do best in the playoffs with this roster as close to full strength as possible. So that's what I'm really hoping for. And on the Giants side of things, this just feels like a bummer. I think the New York Giants have a really bright future in front of them, but it's all just kind of falling apart with injuries this year. And I just, it sucks. Again, sucks for everybody who has to go through these kind of injuries. The Eagles are going through some injuries themselves, but they still have all their top level talent, right? So you got to feel for some of these teams who go through this, on a year-to-year basis, a la the 49ers, who had another rough go of things. That's just football, man. And it sucks. It's frustrating. I am fortunate that the Eagles have done a really good job of staying healthy. That's one of those things that you can't really control. And, it's frustrating to see things on the other side, because you do get robbed of the what ifs. And for the New York Giants, they have a huge what if. What if Malik Neighbors was here? What if their defense was healthy? What if Cam Skattebo was there? What if they got all got the chance to mold together? So that's something that they'll get to see in the offseason. And that's frustrating that they have a slow march to that point, right? So, for the Eagles, this is a really good spot to be in, and you want this kind of success going into the break. We peeled off 2 wins after losing 2 in a row. We thought the sky was falling 2 weeks ago. Now we're, back in rhythm, back in the driver's seat of the conference, and right where we want to be. We're still very much in the quest for the number 1 seed, and this next week after the bye is going to be crucial. So Ben and I will talk about, the week after next is when, we'll definitely break down that Packers game. But I think that, we're in as good as a spot as we could be in, given all the turmoil and drama that seems to surround this team. So I'm really happy personally about where the Eagles are at. For those who panicked a couple weeks ago, You know, how we feeling now? This is one of those things that this is going to be the season for the Eagles. Is they're going to lose games, and there's a lot of good teams coming up, so we're probably going to lose a game or two here. So we don't want to overreact to anything, especially when the Eagles look like they are trending in the right direction now. So that's what's really the most exciting part, is on both sides of the ball, it looks like they're finding their rhythm. Having guys back helps. And our defense is going to look a lot better coming out of the bye week with the addition of Brandon Graham, who unretired for this team, which is a crazy story in and of itself. And Nolan Smith will be returning, so our edge rushers will be healthier. So it looks like we'll have some depth coming back, which is going to be huge. So who knows how we're going to look against the Packers? But we'll talk about that when we get closer. But this is a great way to enter the bye week, a great way to win the game. Again, I'm terribly sorry for all you Giants fans who had to watch this injury. It's frustrating, and I hate to see it. Like you never want that. So, I'm going to leave it here. It's going to be a relatively short post-game pod compared to some of the other ones we've had this year. But I think that the point of this week was to get to the bye and look good. And they did. They did both of those things. So I feel really confident about where this team is going for the second half of the season. So we'll stay tuned. Thank you guys for staying with me on this Behind the Back pod post-game for the Philadelphia Eagles Week 8 edition. This was a good week, a good looking week for the Philadelphia Eagles, and hopefully they can take that, get some rest. It's going to be nice being able to take a rest myself from having to watch the Eagles, and it'll be good to hash things out during the bye week. I think that we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about during this bye week. Ben and I are going to battle on our Sacramento Kings, on our opinions on the Sacramento Kings, and I get to take a break from the Eagles. So it's going to be a good week, guys. It's going to be great. All right, guys. My name is Marcos Conan Negron. If you guys want to hit us up, you can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias. The links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, and follow the show. We appreciate all the love and support as we now hit 200 subscribers. We're so grateful for you guys. Thank you so much.